And I'm proposing, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah.
And any other matters arising from the previous minutes? No? Right, thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, item 3, and we're going to East Ayrshire Suicide Prevention Activity and Action Plan Update 23-24. And that's by Director of Health and Social Care Partnership. I've got Dale Mellor, Senior Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I'm Dale Miller. I work in the Health and Social Care Partnership, and I'm here with my colleague Margaret McLean, who's the Suicide Prevention Lead for East Ayrshire, really to introduce her before she does all the work. But the report in front of you is our suicide prevention activity record from 23-24 and an action plan update for the forthcoming year. What we're going to do is Margaret's going to take you through some highlights in the report, and then we're both available for any questions or follow-up. Thanks. I'll just hand you over to Margaret.
Hi there, good morning. I'd like to start by highlighting paragraphs 7 to 10, please, within the report, which focuses on the newly published data from the National Register for Scotland, NRS. Paragraph 7 shows you that in 2023 there were 792 probable suicide deaths in Scotland, an increase of 30, which is 4% in the previous year. Within paragraph 8, noting the published data within East Ayrshire, which were 24 probable suicides in 2023, which is an increase of 6 from 2022. Within paragraph 9, you can see in 2023 within East Ayrshire, there were 19 males and 5 females who took their own life, which is an increase of 3 females and 3 males than 2022. Within paragraph 10, noting that further analysis of the NRS data by Public Health Scotland identifies that suicide rates within East Ayrshire were amongst the highest in Scotland in 2023. Every death by suicide is a tragedy, and as within paragraph 11, page 86, the report highlights that East Ayrshire Council and associated partners review every individual's death by suicide compassionately on a 6-weekly basis for any learning to be achieved. If we then move on to the key activity, this leads me to note paragraph 14, page 86, to highlight the more positive key activity of learning and development within 2023 and 2024, where it is reported that offering appropriate learning and development to a variety of people and organisation forms a significant part of preventing suicides in East Ayrshire. With this in mind, I'd like to take you to paragraph 17, page 87, where bespoke community suicide prevention training sessions have commenced, with training programmes for community organisations being an integral part of East Ayrshire Suicide Prevention Action Plan moving forward, which is also Appendix 1. I'd like to move forward to paragraph 29, page 88, to note the formation of the Creating Hope Together peer-led bereaved by suicide support group. This is continuing to run as a pilot in 2024 to 2025 and will be evaluated by March 2025. Feedback from the
Margaret, hold on, can I pause a second? The page numbers are a bit mixed up. I apologise to the elected members. We've got the page numbers in the wrong order. So Margaret's quite rightly referring to a page number in her documents, and she's right, but we have a different page numbers. So we're concentrating on what the paragraph is. It's the paragraph she's saying is the right paragraph. Those will match, but the page numbers don't. Sorry to interrupt, Margaret. Thank you. Continue.
Sorry about that. So just to continue, that the pilot will continue through to 2025. First set of feedback has come back has been really positive. The final paragraph from key activity in paragraph 37, Appendix 2, in line with the National Creating Hope Together strategy. This is to highlight the new Ayrshire and Arran Suicide Prevention logo, which has recently been ratified by our Pan-Ayrshire partners and will be launched in the near future. And that takes me to paragraph 38, looking ahead. alongside the promotion of the new Ayrshire suicide prevention logo to promote suicide prevention. The suicide prevention lead has been working in partnership with the Samaritans Kilmarnock branch to recommence the listeners programme within HMP Kilmarnock. The programme will recommence once the Samaritans have settled into their new premises within King Street, Kilmarnock, and further training is undertaken. And finally, to paragraph 41, to highlight the suicide prevention event, Spotlighting Drug Debt, on the 11th of September in Knockanlaw Community Garden, Kilmarnock. Promotional activity is underway with that, and there's guest speakers going to be attending to this. To this end, as stated in paragraph 45, the East Ayrshire Suicide Prevention Lead will continue to actively engage with a wide range of stakeholders to contribute to and help shape the wider suicide prevention policy agenda locally and nationally. In this way, our policies and processes to protect people who are vulnerable to the risk of suicide are better protected. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Dale, have you anything to add at that point?
Not really, Chair. Just to point out that in the appendix you can see our updated action plan. We last brought this to Governance and Scrutiny in June last year. So just to note the progress within that action plan as well, which is the other purpose of the paper today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. And now open it up to the floor to the elected members for any questions. I'm going to Sally first and then Councillor Kyle. Councillor Cogley.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the report. Looking at the suicide prevention activity, and I think what I'm particularly pleased to see is paragraph 34 and also paragraph 36 and 38. Paragraph 34, training needs for taxi drivers, and I think when I saw that in the report, I thought, well, actually, this is just so obvious when you think about it that it wouldn't have occurred to me otherwise. And I'm so pleased to see that included because it really is something that I'm sure is very, very important and can help enormously because in so many instances, taxi drivers must be almost a first line of a cry for help. And I'm also pleased to see the work that's been done with the prison. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. Councillor Kyle.
Just a couple of wee things. I noticed in paragraph 23, 10 GP surgeries in East Ayrshire have been trained. Is it the doctors, is it the nurses? And how do you get an appointment, basically?
Thank you, Councillor Kyle. Could you put your mic off again, please?
Sorry.
Is that an appointment with your GP? I'm unsure how you can get an appointment with your GP. I know that the DBI training has been cascaded throughout the GP surgeries, but unfortunately I don't have that clout to get you a GP appointment. Sorry.
Councillor Kyle again. Thank you.
I just wondered, because it is difficult. The other question I wanted to ask is, a mouthful here, creating Hope Together, peer-led, bereaved by suicide support group. How are they funded and how long are they funded for?
We didn't have any funding for the Bereaved by Suicide support group. It was the ACDI, which is the Auchinleck Community Development Initiative. They supplied the tea and coffee in the venue, and it was free. But it may be in the future that I may need to come to the Health and Social Care Partnership for funding. But so far, no cost.
And thank you to ACDI for providing that support to you for free. If there's no one else in the room, any questions? I've got one myself. On paragraph 7, 8 and 9, where we're talking about probable suicide deaths. The word probable pops up a few times. Can you explain why there's no certainty about what's suicide and what is not, and how the probable word is used? Thank you.
So this data is coming from NRS, and that's what the narrative is. There's so many different, it's so multifactorial that's the kind of word that they use throughout the document, is that probable rather than being that kind of certain suicide.
Thank you, Margaret. Would that I'm thinking that would be perhaps a drug death, and we don't know if it's suicide or if it's accidental overdose. Is there clarification, Dale? Thank you.
They are recorded differently by NRS. So suicide and death by suicide and death by drug-related deaths are recorded separately. So it is quite, Margaret's right, it's multifactorial evidence that's used to classify deaths. And what happens for us locally is we're notified of suspected drug-related deaths and suspected suicides in real time. There's a really robust process for that. But what you see coming through from National Records, National Register, apologies, is a year later where other information has been gathered to support this classification of a death. So it's multiple sources of information that end up compiling these probable data. It's quite complex.
Thank you, Dale, for that explanation. Of no one else in the room? If I can go to paragraph 11, it's great to see all the different partnerships working together. Police Scotland Fire and Rescue, NHS Acute Services, Mental Health, Learning Disabilities and Pharmacies, Housing Services. The only one I don't recognise is Penumbra. Can you tell me what Penumbra is and the work that they do, please?
Thank you, Chair. Penumbra are the commission service that provide the distress brief interventions that we mentioned earlier on. That is a first port of call for people in distress, so they're our service provider.
And we pay for that service, we contract that service.
In collaboration with North and South Ayrshire, this is a contract that's an Ayrshire-wide contract for distress brief interventions.
Thank you very much, Dale. If there's no other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for presenting your paper and turning up today. I'm sorry for the delay starting the meeting, and I hope we'll see you again next time to present more data and more statistics and give you a next report. Thank you very much. Okay, we can move to item 4 on the agenda now, which is East Ayrshire Performance Reports. And as you'll note, it's split up into many different sections, so with different council officers will be presenting different sections of the report. So the first part of the report on my briefing is for revenue, and that's presented by Joe McLaughlin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this East Ayrshire Performance Report was considered and approved by Cabinet yesterday. And the announcement this week, the announcements this week by Scottish Government and the signals around the impending UK Government budget highlight that the continuation of the financial pressures we've seen over recent years is likely to continue for some time to come. When this is then coupled with the significant increase in demand pressures that services are experiencing, then what we do see is a need for services and in general the Council to change, to innovate and to take all possible actions to align service costs to the available financial resource. The report today sets out in financial terms the ongoing stresses and strains that budgets are facing as they try to respond to lower funding, higher demand and increased costs, challenges which don't seem to be going away. It's a different report that's presented today, one where we take account of the financial position at the end of July, the end of Q1. And that's unusual in that it reviewed the actual spend as well as calculating the likely financial projection for services through to March next year. And by spending time analysing that actual spend at July, particularly around those costs that were incurred through supplies and services and through third-party payments, we're able to establish that these budget headings have a combined overspend at July of around £6 million across all services in the Council. More importantly, and by speaking to heads of service and budget holders about the further planned spend and actions they intend to take this year to deal with rising demand and service costs, then there is a potential, if left unchecked, for the Council to end the year with a possible overspend of around £20 million at March. I would stress, members, that this is only likely if no corrective action is taken to reduce costs and, importantly, to reduce demand. And as you know, we've taken previous actions, and you have also taken actions too as a council to prepare us for today. Members have approved increases to the General Fund uncommitted balance. Council approved the revised financial regulations in June, enhancing those financial governance arrangements and requiring recovery plans to be created where overspends occur. You approved the creation of an innovation fund. 5 more projects were approved yesterday by Cabinet, and that fund was created to support services transition and innovate. And again in February, as a council, you took the unprecedented step of setting aside £40 million to tackle poverty, including child poverty, and importantly to support services take action to support early intervention and prevention. In other words, allow spend to happen today that reduces costs tomorrow. However, members, the signs are that there will be no more funding, and as such we have to manage all of our costs and that increasing demand so that our costs align with our budget. And therefore options around service delivery will have to be reviewed through smarter approaches, collaboration, early intervention, prevention, prioritisation, all forming part of that change. As a council management team and in conjunction with the Chief Executive, we've set in motion a series of precautionary measures to ensure that the potential projected overspend does not materialise. These are important measures and they provide time for services to reflect and to set out the necessary plans to enable that change to take place. These plans will take the form of recovery plans that will set out the actions recommended to support budgets and bring budgets back into line. Overall, within the education budget, financial pressures around additional support for learning transport costs, teacher absence cover, additional costs in relation to probationers, as well as managing the £3.5 million carry forward from last year, are all impacting on this budget. The Chief Education Officer, as you would imagine, is completing the necessary recovery plan and is being supported by senior colleagues from my service. The recovery plan will be completed within 4 weeks, in line with the financial regulations, and will then be presented for consideration. Within communities and economy, service pressures exist predominantly within Ayrshire Roads Alliance and within housing and communities, with waste services experiencing pressures. However, as you know, the review of waste management services that was presented to you and approved last week at Council will see short-term funding of around £1.4 million being provided from the General Fund uncommitted balance for this year and next, prior to that service change that the Head of Housing and Communities progressed. We'll then see that the waste management financial model produce surplus for years thereafter. The recovery plan for communities and economy is included within the main East Ayrshire performance before you today. Within health and social care, we see substantial challenges around care at home and learning disabilities, which saw a financial recovery plan being presented to the Integration Joint Board last week. The covering report also sets out the financial resilience indicators that you approved last year. They provide a financial health check of the Council and focuses on our reserves, our capital financing, investment and borrowing costs. They highlight a Council that has a strong financial framework, one that has seen an increase in the availability of our usable reserves. They show a Council that is under strain like all others, but a Council that has taken steps to prepare us for today. And as I said earlier, the creation of that £40 million 10-year fund to support early intervention and prevention will support the Council today and into the future. The report also notes additional costs and service pressures that are being felt from high staff absence levels and sets out the actions that have been taken to support attendance at work. Cabinet yesterday was asked to approve £600,000 from the General Fund uncommitted balance to enable the supporting attendance and wellbeing team to be created for a 3-year period through to March 2027 to support attendance at work by working with services and staff and reducing the level of staff absence and the costs that flow from them. Chair, I'm very conscious that that's a different type of report and even a different type of introduction, and so I'm happy to stop there and take any questions.
Thank you, Joe. I'll open to the room, and bearing in mind there's a lot more to come in the East Ayrshire Performance Report in different sections from different officers presenting. So thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Joe, just across the report, just in general, when we look at the figures, across all the departments, especially education, communities and the economy, health and social care, the projections, the overspends, the figures all seem, every time we see one of these reports, the figures all seem to be going north. Now I know that all of these departments are putting in place their plans to reverse the situation. When do you think we'll start to see in these reports the outcome of those plans actually reversing the projections so that the figures are coming back the way?
So, through you, Chair, so we're seeing that already in the report. If you, in the Communities and Economy page, you can see that action plan that's taken the higher level overspend down to £1.2 million, and further recovery plan actions will be taken within those range of services. So I'm confident that across the piece that will take place. We knew this was coming, not because of anything we'd done, but because of the issues around the higher costs, the levels of funding, but more importantly, the increased demand for all of our services, which is just growing exponentially. Now that's going to take us to some challenging places, but the recovery plans will be the signpost that will take us there. They are required within 4 weeks, and so I think they will set out the actions which will bring the budgets back into line. Today's report, we knew this was coming. So that's why we did the stop, almost the freeze of Q1 and see the figure. And then did that projection. We always do the projection. And so because the financial regulations were approved and because we knew the challenges that services were facing, then by flagging up today that we're taking precautionary measures to stop that projection materialising, then we're best placed to do that. I'm confident that as we go forward with those range of measures, with support from my team, colleagues in procurement and elsewhere, then that overspend won't materialise. I have to also state, though, that some of the costs that flow from the demand are fairly high tariff costs, so particularly within social care, where it's not quite so easy to turn off that tap of demand. And that's why you saw the IJB receive and approve a recovery plan last week. That has to find its way into the council setting because that recovery plan highlighted actions within the social care element of health and social care. And so colleagues within the IJB and the Chief Officer will likely be contacting members to take them through the implications of that, and that's going to be really important. So there's some things we can stop immediately, freeze on posts, for example. Some of the other high tariff matters are things that require careful management, so that we can still be an effective council, but recognise that as we go forward, the financial envelope is unlikely to get any bigger, and so it's about managing demand. We have asked services to consider so much, and they have delivered time and time again. The next stage is around that early intervention and prevention, spending today to save tomorrow, and there were good examples of that yesterday at Cabinet. But there's also a realisation that in terms of the service provision, that reprioritisation, eligibility type thing needs to be looked at too, and that's where Chief Officers are at present, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Richardson. Thank you, Joe, for that explanation. Go next to Vice Chair, Councillor Cogley.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Joe. I think what I struggle with in this is that every year we go through a budgeting process and we all agree ahead what the budgets are going to be in every department. And how, therefore, do we find ourselves in a position after Q1 where whatever the budgeting process was clearly completely out of whack? And is that because we are just unduly optimistic in what we think we can achieve, or we don't budget properly, or money that should have been coming in hasn't come in? I mean, I'd like some clarification on that. Sorry, Joe, that's not very well put, but I really struggle with why we're in this position.
And again, through you, Chair. So members met in February and set the budget for the year ahead. At that time, indications were with budgets that there were pressures within those budgets for 2023-24, but generally they would be overspends, but they would be manageable. We ended the year post-budget with services in overspend, predominantly within health and social care, and they used their service balances to bring that back to zero at 31st of March, and that was their tactic. Within non-IGIB services, they ended the year around £5 or £6 million overspend, if memory serves me right, the majority of that flowing into education and some flowing into communities and economy. So when we did the Q1 figure, that £6 million, £5 or £6 million materialised. So the budget was sound, the budget was balanced, and the budget was considered by members in accordance with the legal obligations that rest with them. So the budget was balanced. The services carried forward an overspend of around £5 or £6 million, and we're seeing that at Q1. What we're seeing in addition to that, which is quite concerning, is that flow of demand, that flow of expectation within the communities for our services is such that it's growing at an incredible rate. And if we were to continue to provide services this year the way we did last year and meet all of that demand, then costs would move from that £6 million that carried forward to some extent to around 20. And so it's now a case of considering how we manage that demand this year, because it is clearly growing. We've known it's growing for years, but it's that challenge that we have as a collective CMT, and it's important to stress as a collective CMT. There are some services that have got really heavy shoulders at the moment trying to manage this, but as a collective trying to find innovative and imaginative ways to support services, we can do that. But I would stress that the budget that was set was a correct budget, and it was a balanced budget. We knew there would be non-IGB overspends. We can see them at Q1. But what we are seeing in this report is just that uncontrollable demand.
Thank you very much for that. I also wanted to ask a couple of questions about absence, but would we be better off dealing with that later? Yeah? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe, for that explanation. Back to Councillor Richardson.
It's just a question that I had for possible later on, but it flows into Councillor Cogley's question really well. So I think it's probably best to ask Joe it now, because it's tied in with Councillor Cogley's question. Joe, sometimes I can read these papers and I can come to the wrong conclusion, but it's really just... It's a question about page 89, where it talks about basically education and social care budgets being capped at a percentage of the total East Ayrshire budget. And there's a table there which would indicate that the ratio for education might be capped at somewhere around 38%, because since 2019 to 2024, the range for the education budget looks to be, and again I hope I'm reading this right, somewhere between 36.52% of the total East Ayrshire budget to its highest point, 38.28%. And similar for social care. Social care seems to be capped round about 30%. At its lowest in 2019, at its lowest in 2020. No, sorry, at its lowest in 2021, it's 28.77%, but at its highest in 2022, it's 30.74%. So, my question is, one, what percentage of the total East Ayrshire budget are these two services, education and social care, actually capped at? And given that we've spoken about this exponential rise in demand on these two services, probably in particular, is operating a cap on their budgets actually realistic, or are we at a stage where we really need to think about, if we do have to operate a cap, increasing the cap for these two services, but obviously that would mean finding money by making real cuts in other services.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. As I've noticed the figures you're quoting are in the financial resilience part of the report, which is Colin Hastings.
It'll be Joe, Chair.
Colin's not here. So it's Joe as well. But do you want to answer now, or do you want to wait until the financial resilience part comes up?
We can do it now.
You can do it now. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Joe. All my questions seem to come to you.
So there is no cap. Let me be clear. What that table is showing is not a cap. Okay. It's showing the percentage of the total council budget that's consumed by education services and by social services. So there is no cap. As elected members, you go further. You go the opposite of a cap. You protect. So education budget's around £138 million from memory, and you protect the entirety of the teacher's salary budget from cuts. So £65 million of that £138 million is protected from cuts. Those cuts fall on Blair's service, David's service, my service, in a disproportionate rate, which is right. In terms of health and social care, again, it's not a cap. And go further again, Scottish Government says that every council in Scotland, in setting their budget, has to provide a future year budget to the Health and Social Care Partnership that is that is the same value of the previous year's budget plus new money. And the new money must be additional and not substitutional. So those two budgets are very, very well protected. Disproportionately protected in my mind. Especially given their scale. When you protect £138 million budget, then the part that's left over has to fall on their services. And when you protect £110 million budget in social care, then that flows to other services too. So it's not a cap. What it's showing is how much of those two large services utilise the entire budget. And so when officers try and flex and try and find ways to make things balance, you're almost taken to those two services, but then the controls within them apply. So just to stress it, it's absolutely not a cap. It's just an indication of the consumption. What I would stress in terms of the last year, 2023-24, which from memory is the only year they've ever reduced, albeit there's a very small reduction in earlier days for social care. The reason those two budgets reduced by a small percentage this year is because of the movements in our relative population for GAE, where our children's services reduced because, relatively speaking, we have less children than the relative need rest of Scotland, and the same with social care. Children's services GE fell, only adult social care GE increased, so that's why we're seeing that slight dip. It's nothing to do with the decision that officers made or members made, it's just the funding that flowed through had reduced.
Thank you, Joe. That's okay. Thank you. With Colin Hastings now here, I'm also looking at alternative model delivery, financial resilience. Yeah. Business briefings, complaints, risks. This is all you, Joe.
Sadly.
Yeah, this could be a rough morning, Joe. The best of luck. I'll go to Councillor Cogley next. Thank you.
Yeah, just one more, and again, I'm not sure if I'm bringing this up in the right place. Onto the revenue budget, paragraph 15, and just parking teacher absence for the moment. I see we've got a cost of probationers of 422,000. Was it anticipated that that would be funded centrally? Joe, thank you.
So through you, Chair. So as part of the funding we receive each year from government, we're required to meet certain obligations. One of those obligations is that we offer newly qualified teachers a year probation within our schools. But then what then happens is a rather complex calculation takes place around whether or not a probationer is fully funded or a probationer is part funded. So, for example, I would imagine, and the ice is creaking under my feet here because I'm going to places I don't really know. So, if, for example, you had a secondary probationer who had a rather unique subject, then the council may get them fully funded, whereas a regular primary teacher would be part funded probably about 0.6 or 0.8. So what's happened here is that that balance between fully funded and part funded has gone down a bit, which meant that there's then a cost to the council in taking those probationers forward. So that's what's happened there. So.
And was that an additional, an anticipated cost?
So I think it was unanticipated in that we were expecting perhaps more probationers than we got. We got less than we had imagined, and that ratio of funded to part funded also changed as well.
Thank you, Joe. A few questions myself, if the room will indulge me. Paragraph 12, top of page 68, paragraph 12 is bullet point 4. The frequency of budget management reporting to heads of services will be increased. What's the frequency they've been reporting now, and what is it you're proposing for that frequency?
So we have a general ledger that has 12 periods, one for each month, and we have 4 reporting periods from that general ledger. They align to the East Ayrshire Performance reporting periods. There are also opportunities taken at the end of each period, so each month, for high-level reports to be presented to heads of service by my team and to budget holders too. What we are recommending, and we meet on Monday to discuss the mechanics of how we make this happen, is that there will be fortnightly high-level budgetary control reports run on supplies and service budgets and on third-party payment budgets. Third-party payments are where we're paying contractors with placements, care costs and the like. So they'll be fortnightly, retrospective, but what we should begin to see through those reports and with the actions taken by elected members through the precautionary measures is that orders and the like or costs should begin to tail off, and we should, through these fortnightly reports which will run throughout the year now, see a lowering of the costs coming through. It will provide heads of service the opportunity to reflect on costs that have been incurred in their name, and it will also allow the Chief Executive, Monitoring Officer and myself to review those costs both at a service basis and at a wider council level. These are just precautionary measures, however, just to manage, well services manage that demand as a collective CMT.
Thank you, Joe. Paragraph 13, and it links to paragraph 21. The Health and Social Care Partnership, can you explain how the 50% of our overspend roughly is Health and Social Care Partnership, and what's the link there with IJB, and then and how that works? Paragraph 21 is IJB are doing a financial recovery plan of their own, and when would that be circulated?
So, forgive me for what I'm about to explain, because it is quite complex and at some points logic seems to flow away. So the Integration Joint Board is a legally constituted body that is sees funding flow from East Ayrshire Council and NHS Ayrshire Nairn to the Integration Joint Board. The Integration Joint Board has one employee, Craig MacArthur, as the Chief Officer. The Integration Joint Board has no power to overspend. They are, to all intents and purposes, a commissioning body, and they will use the £110 million from the Council and I think about £180 million from the Health Board, if I'm right. And they will commission services. They will commission services from the NHS and they will commission services from the Council via the Health and Social Care Partnership. And Health and Social Care Partnership is essentially social work. So what we're seeing here is a projected potential overspend on the social care arm of the Health and Social Care Partnership. In other words, the body that the IJB has commissioned to deliver services in line with their integration scheme. So that's why the overspend has occurred. How it gets corrected is that the Integration Joint Board, in line with the integration scheme that the law wraps around the IJB, is required to produce a recovery plan when an overspend takes place in that commissioning. So that's what's happened, and the recovery plan was considered and approved by the Integration Joint Board last Thursday, I think it was. What you'll begin to see now is the actions that the Health and Social Care Partnership will undertake to bring the budget back into line, and that's why, as I said earlier, it's important that members are involved in that process. I have to talk about the governance here. The Integration Joint Board will approve it, and once it's approved, it will happen. But clearly, members will be keen to see the implications of the actions taken within that recovery plan, given that it will impact on certain aspects of service.
Thank you, Joe. I'll keep going if there's no other questions from the room. Paragraph 12, the first bullet point, a freeze is placed on the filling of all non-essential vacancies. Can you clarify what you mean by non-essential vacancies? Is there the criteria on that where that would not apply?
So, it's important that I note that as a council we have really strong governance around this already. We have a workforce review group where the Deputy Chief Exec, myself, Head of People and Culture and colleagues from the Health and Social Care Partnership meet each month to approve vacancies that services wish to fill. And we have consideration to budget and to service need and also to risk implications. What Bullet 1 is saying is that as a means to support services, manage that demand, one way to do that is to put a freeze on non-essential vacancies. We are quite clear that we should not define non-essential. You know, we've said non-essential, we've said essential only, we've said business critical. We've given a flavour of what that means, but it's for heads of service, having regard to the responsibilities and risks that lie within them, to determine what is and what isn't essential. So that would be the understanding of bullet point 1. And where the WRG, or the Workforce Review Group, is minded to fill a vacancy, even with bullet 1 being active, then in most cases we would seek to do that on a temporary basis, giving both the head of service and you as councillors the opportunity to review that at a later date. So that's the governance that was already in place, and that's the enhanced precautionary measures that have been put in place last week. And you know, that'll take time for that to kick in. There are applications in the system prior to this change, and it's only right that they're considered differently until such times as colleagues get the opportunity to work effectively around what Bullet 1 is trying to do.
Thank you, Joe. Moving on to paragraph 15. Sorry, no, 14. Oops. additional support for learning budget with a 2.6 million overspend. 2.3 million of that is relating to transport costs. Is this a statutory transport cost, or is this discretionary?
So again, colleagues in education, supported and led by the Chief Education Officer, are reviewing this and being supported by colleagues in other parts of the Council, including my own service. This is a budget that has substantial funding within it, and even with that substantial funding is overspending to the tune of £2.3 million. So there is a review taking place of the statutory requirements that fall on a council in terms of that provision, and also looking at other ways of operating. It's a budget that predominantly is serviced by private taxis, and the review, which is well advanced, and you'll hear more when the recovery plan is presented to you in 4 weeks' time, will look at other options besides taxis that could perhaps, through the procurement of more buses, for example, that could have opportunities to bring those budgets down. But fundamental to this, and the point you made is quite right, the opportunity has been taken to look at the statutory requirement that relates to ASN transport in order to manage this budget in a different way.
Thank you, Joe, for that explanation. I'm now looking at paragraph 18, top of page 69, and it's Ayrshire Roads Alliance. I don't know if if Jane Corrie wants to come in, perhaps. We're also looking at HVO diesel. I'm wondering how much we're going to save by switching from HVO to diesel. I remember it come up in the waste review, but that was referring specifically to our bin lorries. So if we're also talking about the full council switching for other vehicles that are not bin lorries, what would be the kind of saving that we would make? The Ayrshire Roads Alliance is experiencing budget pressures. Can we get a breakdown of these numbers? It's secondary school transport provision, roads maintenance, street lighting, parking services. Can we break that down possibly, get some numbers for each?
Richard, Chair.
Richard's taking that one? Okay, thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Give Joe a break, Chair, and try and pick this up and pass on to Jane for any of the specific detail. Certainly in terms of HVO to diesel, as members are aware, the figure that was attached to waste management was £250,000 in that regard. The estimated total saving for the council as a whole is just over £500,000, £510,000 in relation to the shift from HVO to diesel. What I would say, Chair, is that HVO and the cost of HVO are subject to significant fluctuation, and only in recent months that figure was significantly higher than 510,000, but we'll obviously keep a close eye on that, but it's not an insignificant figure at all. In terms of, you mentioned paragraph 18, particularly in relation to the school transport, there are three key critical parts of this, and that overarching figure of 1.112 million overspend. The first one is the impact of provision of subsidised places on schools' buses. That's a non-statutory subsidised transport. That's just over £600,000, and that'll be the subject of a forthcoming report to Cabinet, where Jane and her colleagues will take members through some proposals in that regard. The second part is in relation to transporting pupils to schools out with their catchment area, which is circa £74,000. And the third one is inflationary increase to contract rates, which is £433,000. And this is largely a national issue. I don't know whether through you, Chair, Jane, has anything to add on sort of the broader questions around some of the other areas of error and overspend, but hopefully that's of assistance, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. And we'll go to Jane Corrie. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would just refer you to page 77. There's a further breakdown there in terms of the street light and electricity costs of 367,000, winter maintenance increased costs of 193,000, And then income shortfalls from road maintenance funding is 656,000. And lower than anticipated parking charges, so an income shortfall in parking charges of 234,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Just to come back to Richard on the non-statutory transport, obviously I believe the pilot just before schools broke up was very, very successful. Most members will know the background to the pilot. It was all about linking up with Stagecoach and the use of the Scottish Government under 22 bus passes, basically to take the burden in the non-statutory transport from East Ayrshire Council and place it on to Transport Scotland. I just wondered when we'll hear through a paper coming back as to when the success of that pilot actually means the provisions or the service that's going to be put in place will actually, you know, flow into actually not being a pilot any longer, but actually starting off and being the way that we're going to go forward. I think the plan was to see this particular school term out, and then if the pilot had been a success, which I believe it was to be put into place as the way forward from the next academic term, but I'm not sure on that point. So it was just to see when we'll see a paper coming back on how the pilot ran and when the actual findings from the pilot will actually be put in place.
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Richardson. The October Cabinet is when we're aiming for in terms of bringing a paper before members that will give the results of the pilot together with the timescales for implementation.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson, for the question, and Richard for the reply. I think now we can move on to the next parts. I'm back to Joe, and we're looking at council initiatives, alternative delivery models, and financial resilience, if that's okay, Joe.
That's absolutely fine, Chair. Let me just change my notes. So we move to council initiatives, page 83. Members, these are set when you met as council and approved these as part of the budget. And so the page before you shows the particular initiative. It shows the funding that you gave and the projected spend as at the year end, and the work that's been done to progress the will of council as part of the budget. In respect of the temporary additional post for corporate enforcement team, we see that one officer has been recruited and another will be recruited later in the year. Within the allocation for additional roads and pavement works and that £400,000 that you approved, works have started, patching works on West and East Shaw Street and Bonnerton Road, Kilmarnock, and plans are in place to use the remainder of that fund by the year end. And again, a few weeks ago, we saw the return of young people to schools and the second year of half-price school meals. There's no material spend that's taken place to date, but we will provide members with updates in future East Ayrshire performance report. But you can see from the table the early indications which suggest that not all of that allocation will be required in order to deliver the initiative by the council, but the service will clearly give updates on that, and it may be required once further updates are given. And with including grants for 3 and 4 year olds, that £50 allocation that you approved, this has been progressed as an online self-validated form. It supports parents and carers to get that award quickly. And in line with the policy for early years admissions, what we've asked colleagues to do is to provide a process that will open the grants application process at specific points in the year to align with the dates when children will commence their early years placement. But we know from the information we've got through that August intake that the 170 awards have been made, benefiting 177 young people and their families. Finally, members, the expansion of the financial inclusion team, which was for 6 months since April, that's now will end at the end of this month. I'm pleased to say that that funding will be completed very soon, and that colleagues and people in culture have supported those staff to find employment, permanent employment, in other relevant opportunities within the council, including in my own service. Alternative delivery models start on page 85. They provide details of the consolidated budget both for Ayrshire Roads Alliance and also for the Leisure Trust. In respect of the Alliance, it shows a projected overspend of around £1.8 million. We continue to see that underspend in that strategic delivery arm. We know from previous years it's due to employee vacancies, turnover and recruitment. But within East local delivery, we see variances within income shortfalls for roads maintenance. We've got lower than what we expected for parking income, and we have higher street lighting and electricity costs. And when you look at what's happening in the local delivery for the South Ayrshire Council element, you can see similar pressures that exist. What you do see in this page also is the capital budgets that's been allocated by councils at South and also from yourselves. And we note in this section a series of unexpected road slips that have been experienced recently. The head of Ayrshire Roads Alliance has used capital funds and redirected them to stabilise these road slips, whilst a permanent solution is both designed and implemented. Got to stress, though, members, these were unexpected, and they'll place some pressure on the roads capital budget on both the roads and bridges part. But we'll work together as a team to try and support the head of ARA through that. In terms of the bus station, we note the work's projected to be completed this month, and we also note that resurfacing the programme is progressing well. No issues identified, and we can see that over 50% of the planned works will be completed by the end of the month. On page 87, we see the Leisure Trust and a very small surplus, but a surplus nonetheless of £10,000 projected for year end. And I think that demonstrates really the incredible work that both trustees do, but also that management team at the Trust day and take to progress that success of the Leisure Trust, bucking the trend in terms of financial management around leisure trusts and the services within it. And if I can just move on to the resilience indicators on page 89, already just touched briefly on them, but they set out the measures that Council approved. They show the availability of resources as well as details, as I said, about capital financing and borrowing costs. They are almost a barometer, thermometer of the financial health of the Council. They show that our usable reserves have increased in 2023-24, and you've been kind enough to support me and colleagues in that endeavour. But you've also saw that the general fund uncommitted balance has also increased, and we spoke about that some months ago, about the need to prepare for that in line with this report and in advance of this report. And you can see from that second row, but the unallocated resources within the general fund, that 11.965 is the highest it's been for many a year. And again, we've seen that capital financing cost, that limit that you did set as a council on our capital programme, 8 pence in the council tax pound, currently about 6 and a bit pence. So within that limit too, albeit you know the work that Head of Facilities and Property Management and colleagues undertook to review that capital programme as well, and you'll see a Treasury report that's going to wrap the visa bill around that coming to you in a few weeks' time. And within Treasury, we've got £35 million of borrowing that we took at the start of the year from Public Works Loan Boards. It shows our debt, and it also shows that we've got around £49 million of investments. And that's all been there to try and support the capital programme. And importantly, and you'll see this when the Treasury report comes, our cash flow, our daily cash flow, which is important given the size and scale of our organisation, that's been helpful too. Chair, I'm happy to stop there before we move across to Simon for capital.
Thank you, Joe. I think we'll break it down if we look at Council Initiatives, page 83, if there's any questions in the room. Council Initiatives. I'll go myself then. Just a comment about the clothing grant, 3 to 4-year-olds. 172 awards for clothing grants for ECCs, and 177 children and their families have got assistance there. Really positive, a really good initiative by the council. I would also say the half-price school meals, that was actually an idea that came from Councillor Lillian Jones and came through our group and was approved with cross-party support from all the councillors and agreed as a council policy, and that's been very popular with pupils and parents from the schools. I'm sad to see that the Scottish Government are now looking not to go forward in that regard. That's on the front of a local newspaper. The underspend, the totals in the table, there's an underspend of 252,000. If you do the total of 2.062 million and subtract the 1.8, where does the 252,000 saving go, and how that just go back into the general pot?
So again, it shows up in two places. Half-price school meals, an allocation from council of £860,000. We think maybe the cost will be £628,000, and within the clothing grants, £40,000. But we're showing £20,000 by the end of the year. So let me just put a wee order bit of caution here. We know from months gone past that food costs are still high, and that they tend to increase at a very high rate. The latest indication about inflation is that it is likely to rise to around 2.6% rather than come down. And so a watching brief in that one, Chair, if that's okay. I think the 860 may be needed. In terms of clothing grants, 20,000 against 40. Again, I would just say I would rather keep the 40 at the moment. This is an incredible thing that happens here. This is social publication in action. What happens, and what we found in the past with this, is that once the PR is announced and once the form is made live, and it's a dead simple process. You validate the form. If you've not filled it in right, you're advised to correct that cell, and then once it's all validated, you then submit, and then it's reviewed and you get your payment. What we see in the past is that Facebook tends to light up when this thing happens. So there's £20,000 being spent, depending how Facebook lights up in the January intake and in the Easter intake. It may require the full 40, but that's where we are at the moment. I would prefer, if it's at all possible, to keep the 2.062, if that's okay.
Thank you, Joe. Andrew Kennedy wants in, and then we'll take a question from Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose just on the half-price school meals, in addition to the points Joe's made in terms of the volatility of food prices, etc., the way we set up the programme in year one was obviously the commitment was made in April, but obviously it didn't start until the August. So the money that was allocated for last year, there was a balance left that was carried forward into this year to take us up to June. So the 860 is effectively a full year cost. So obviously if members are minded, then obviously that balance would actually be allowed to be used from April to June next year to take it on to the full academic year rather than the financial year. So that's why there is also that's a larger difference as well, just because it's the school year difference.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Just coming back to yourself, Peter, and a point you made as Chair there about the Scottish Government not going forward with free school meals across the board. That is right, obviously, and the Scottish Government's going to have to make a lot of other hard decisions, and just like us, they're going to have to make cuts. But I just highlight to you, Peter, that as your own Labour Wes Streeting said when he was involved down in Wales, where Labour are in power, that all roads lead back to Westminster, and that these cuts are Labour's austerity 2.0 agenda, and that, as I say, the cuts that we make here and the cuts that the Scottish Government are going to have to make over the years to come are Labour cuts.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. I wouldn't envy any of our elected representatives in Westminster or Holyrood. There's a great big mess to sort out, and I don't envy them the choices they have to make. Thank you. Moving on to alternative delivery models, page 85. If there's any questions on that page? No? Page 86 and 87, if there's any questions. I would comment on the table on page 87. Positive numbers there, especially at a time with the East Ayrshire Leisure Trust, when they don't have any income from the Palace Theatre just now because of refurbishment. On the capital on the left on page 86, I've noticed that there's all these road slips happening. I don't know if it's Joe or if we go to Ayrshire Roads Alliance about the expense. How much is that costing to cope with all these road slips and doing the repairs? And how did obviously the money for that to do that essential work is going to have to come out of different budgets. Jane, thank you.
Yeah, obviously the cost depends on the extent of the works required, and sometimes this can, it can be upwards of $500,000 plus to repair some of these slips. Some of them are less severe and might only cost 100,000, but you've also then got to bear in mind that the works that's required beforehand with geotechnical surveys, etc., to come up with options and designs, which can often be costly as well. So yeah, we'll need to look at there's a few route slips that are being monitored over periods of time. So there's some that have been showing signs of distress for a number of years, and we've been monitoring these. And then when it becomes essential, we then sometimes have to take action at short notice, but others are more planned. When it's a case of short notice, then we have to adjust our other capital spending to accommodate these.
And this, the geotechnical thing, your surveyors, we don't have someone in council that can do that. We need to contract out to an expert somewhere.
Yeah, that's quite specialist, and we contract out. The ones that we've got on board at the moment are Fairhurst, who do those for us at the present time.
Thank you, Jen. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Just really a question to Jane. There was a elected members briefing came out maybe two days ago, Jane. It was about, I think it was possibly linked to the bridge issue, where we've had to advise contractors down in the sort of, well, I think it's kind of Councillor Lennox's ward, that we've had to advise the contractors that are going backwards and forwards to the site of the new wind farm that these roads are no longer, they can no longer take the site traffic that's going backwards and forwards. Seen a situation where the roads are taking a pounding due to heavy HGV traffic, but there's a contractor building a wind farm. Does all of that cost have to come back to ARA and the council? Or is there any way that the contractor can share in some of the repairs costs there? I'm just a question. I'm not an expert on it, just what your thoughts are.
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Chair. The one you're referring to, Councillor Richardson, is the A713 at Polnesson, which we've had a slip there that has appeared unexpectedly, and we've got a 20-metre long transverse crack along the carriageway, so we've had to actually shut part of the road, and that's one of the routes for abnormal load deliveries to several wind farms on the A713, so we've had to be in contact with them and advise them that they can't use that route, because even though they could pass it, we're concerned that the weight of the traffic for their abnormal loads might cause us some issues. But you're quite right in saying that they have been using that route for abnormal load deliveries in the past and quite frequently. So we are going to be back in touch with them to see if they would consider making some form of contribution to us to allow us to probably carry out the work sooner, because they'll be concerned about having to use a longer diversion route for their work. There is no weight restriction on the road at present, but it is abnormal loads that they've been using, and we've allowed them to do that. Whether we can actually legally require them to make a contribution is a different matter, because we would have to prove that it was their loads that had done the damage, which can be very difficult to do.
Thanks for that answer, Jane.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Councillor Richardson, for the question. Page 89, any questions on financial resilience? Or page 91, any questions on Treasury? we'll move on then. The next part is capital programme, so we go to Simon Bell, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and good morning, members. The programme's continuing to face financial challenges due to high construction costs and high interest rates, and the projects are being closely monitored to ensure that essential scopes aligned with the affordability caps for individual projects. As usual, without going through the report in great detail, if I could just highlight some key points for a selection of projects, starting with completed projects. The Council's first passive house, new build at Dunlop Early Childhood Centre was handed over on the 9th of August, and pupils returned for the new term on the 21st of August, and the official opening event took place earlier this week. There's approximately £25 million of construction contracts currently on site, and that includes the St Sophia's Primary School Enerfit refurbishment and the Galston Office and Library projects, both which started in January and are both progressing well. We also have the SHIP programme development at Kennedy Drive in Kilmarnock, and the first phase of homes are due to be handed over later this month. And with projects at a detailed design stage, these include the demolition of the multi-storey car park in Kilmarnock, where a contractor has now been appointed and works are due to commence on Monday. The Cultural Kilmarnock project, where a planning application has now been lodged, and the project team continue to work closely with advisors engaged by the UK Government. A contractor has also now been appointed to assist in improving programme timescales and developing the project for market testing. And at Student Academy, designs for extension and refurbishment have been revised around future growth projections and essential needs. Consultation with key stakeholders is scheduled for later this month, and a planning application will be lodged thereafter. At the earlier stages of development, we've got the Ayrshire Engineering Park and Ayrshire Manufacturing and Investment Corridor at Muirfield as part of the Ayrshire Growth Deal, with an outline planning application for the master plan now submitted. It's anticipated that Phase 1 site infrastructure works could commence in spring of next year. At the Galleon Centre, a priority scope of works and implementation programme is now being developed with key stakeholders based on the design team's REBA Stage 1 proposals. And with the Doon Valley Community Campus, a range of surveys have been undertaken over the summer break to inform the development of more detailed proposals, which are anticipated to be prepared for later this year, early next year. So thanks, Chair. That's just a kind of brief summary of some of the highlights, but happy to take any questions.
I've switched off. Sorry. Thank you, Simon. Councillor Cogley.
Simon, thank you for that, because there's a huge number of projects that are underway. The Galston office facilities, I see you've got a problem in the roof. What is the problem, and how is that going to impact on the completion date, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Through you. As is noted in the report, there's not unexpectedly with older buildings, when opening up works were undertaken, when the contractor was on board, they found some kind of unusual or unforeseen areas of support at the edge of the roof structure, which has required some steel to be introduced to support the edge of the roof, which hadn't been anticipated. So inevitably a bit of extra work. It's taking some extra design time, and there'll be some additional time to the contract to accommodate that work. But you know, we are at a kind of reasonably early stage in the project just now, and the contractor is going to try and mitigate the impact of that additional time. We would hope to get finished in January of next year, but we're just flagging up at the moment that it's potentially a possibility that it will run a wee bit later just because of that additional work.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question and the reply. Have we any other questions on the capital programme, page 93 to 96? No? Okay, we'll move on to the next part, which is people. And we're going to Donna for that one. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So the people pages within the East Ayrshire Performance Report starts on page 97 with the statistics for absence being on page 98. For this period, there were 1,765 employees absent, which was an increase of 101 people compared to 1,664 for the same period last year. And it should be noted that there are more working days lost. So that's 22,171 days lost, which was an increase of 3,394 compared to 18,777 for the same period last year. This has resulted in a rise of 0.6 working days lost per employee. The top 5 reasons for absence are detailed in the graph in your report, and for both years they're detailed there. So in terms of the highest reason for absence is stress personal, and that's been the same for 23-24 and 24-25 currently. And the same for the second reason, musculoskeletal has been the second highest for both years. For third and fourth ranked, those have swapped. So it was operations recovery in 23-24, and now it's changed to stomach abdominal. And it was stomach abdominal for 23-24, and this has changed to operations recovery. In terms of the fifth main reason for absence for 24-25, this is now stress work-related, where historically it was respiratory. For short-term absence, the total working days lost is 17,958.51, which equates to 3.11 work days lost per employees. And this was an increase from the same period last year, where the work days lost total was 15,397.14, equating to 2.66 work days lost per employee, which is an increase of 0.45. For long-term absence, the total work days lost is 4,212.49 and 0.74 work days lost per employee, an increase from the same period last year, where the total was 3,379.86 work days lost, equating to 0.58 working days lost per employee, which was an increase of 0.16. That was for the long-term absence. On page 99 of the report, the occupational health activity details that there were 383 occupational health appointments, an increase of 147 from the same period last year, 103 early interventions, which was an increase of 42 for the same period last year, and 82 physiotherapy appointments took place, which was an increase of 22 from the same period last year. Also to note, members, the current occupational health contract came to an end on the 11th of August 2024, and following a re-tender exercise, the new provider is PAM OH Solutions. This is a pan-Ayrshire contract with North and South Ayrshire councils, with East Ayrshire being the lead authority. There will be a transition process in the coming weeks as we introduce a new online system, and new procedures will be rolled out, as well as transferring of all medical records from Optima Health to PAM OH. Communications will be issued throughout this process to managers and employees, and we're working with providers to make the process as smooth as possible for everyone. Following a report to CMT on the 17th of July 24, detailing further proposals on how to address absence, and as mentioned earlier by Joe, we're now pursuing additional capacity for targeted resources to address absence levels and combine support and attendance at work and wellbeing support to employees. And noting that this is a spend to save initiative to reduce sickness absence in services across the council. We're also extending the remit of the absence independent review panel, with an update being reported back to Cabinet later in the year. The disciplinary activity is detailed at the bottom of page 99 of the report, and this shows that there was 1 verbal warning, 1 written warning, 2 final warnings, and 1 with no formal action taken, and there are 4 that are still under consideration. For grievance activity at the top of page 100, this details that 1 was concluded at stage 2, and there are 2 ongoing cases. The whistleblowing case received further allegations, which were added, investigated, and being reviewed by the senior managers at the moment. On page 100, members should note that headcount across the council since this time last year has decreased by 71 people, or 1%. and from the previous quarter has decreased by 63 people, or 0.9%. The biggest decrease was in temporary employees within education, which is expected at this time of the year. So on page 101 of the report, Developing a Young Workforce, members should note that while there has been a decrease in the total modern apprentices by 17 compared to the previous quarter, this was due to two training agreements coming to an end and 14 young people who have gained posts within East Ayrshire Council and one who's gained a post externally. Also on page 101, members will see a breakdown of the Jobs and Training Fund, and as at the 30th of June, the Council have 87 young people in post, although the numbers have decreased by 13. This is due to these individuals gaining posts within or out with the Council or moving on to other destinations. It should be highlighted that in the last quarter, 82% of our leavers from training programmes have been successful in gaining employment. So recruitment processes for the final year of the current Jobs and Training Fund have commenced and will be ongoing over the coming months. In terms of the recruitment update, that's also detailed at the bottom of page 101. It's noted that the hard-to-fill vacancies still continue to be within the Health and Social Care Partnership, and admin and clerical posts across council services, modern apprentices are being encouraged to apply where it's appropriate for them to do so. On page 102, details are provided on the number of employees leaving the council in the period, and there was a total of 122, which is an increase from the last quarter. And this was related to 41 people who retired, 75 people who resigned, and 6 people who were reported under other, and this was dismissals due to ill health. In terms of payroll activity, detailed on page 102, the number of terminations has decreased by 636 compared to the same period last year. Members should note that pays processed in the period was 23,552. The numbers of cars leased is currently 526 compared to 380 in the same period last year, which is an increase of 146 cars. In terms of communications overview, this is detailed on page 103 and highlights inquiries, activity and campaigns that the communications team have been involved in, and noting that they were involved in a number of key events, including employee awards, climate change awards and the general election. Work continues with excellent progress for our website's accessibility, with East Ayrshire Council achieving 2nd place in Scotland and 29th place in the UK at the end of June. In terms of organisational development performance areas, these are detailed on pages 103 and 104 and provides members with more details on the online induction module, leadership programmes, mentoring framework and FaceTime engagement. Noting that 100% of new starts have completed their welcome induction within the first 3 months of starting their employment with the Council. Members will also note that the number of FaceTime engagement is 49%, and as these are carried out across the Council at different times of the year, it will never be 100%. The People and Culture Organisational Development Manager has meetings scheduled with the Chief Executive and the 2 Deputy Chief Execs and Heads of Service, where all of the OD performance matters are routinely discussed to improve and agree appropriate actions across services to ensure maximum completion within required timescales and to highlight areas of concern. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Donna, for that report. We're referring to, on our papers, it's paragraph 26 to 30 is the people section. If we have any questions, it's helpful if you refer to the paper and the paragraph or the table that you're referring to. Any questions or comments? Councillor Cogley, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And Donna, thank you very much for presenting the report. And I'm going to start my comments with a caveat, because I genuinely believe that we should be supporting people who are genuinely ill for whatever reason. But I look at these stats and I just think, as a business model, this is unsustainable. And if we were a business trying to get funding for whatever we were trying to do, that incorporated this level of HR expense on absence, we would not get funding for it. It's an unsustainable model. And I think I'm delighted that we are setting up a team that will come under the banner of early intervention, so that we are doing more proactive work in looking at the cost of absence and how we address it. But I know from my now, 7 or 8 years in governance and scrutiny, and I think I've probably asked questions about absence at every meeting that I have attended, I don't understand how we have absence levels that are so high when I know in the private sector we don't have absence levels that are that high. I know when we look at our framework and the policies and the procedures for managing people and managing absence, I know we're pretty good at following the regulations and doing what we're doing and doing that properly. But what that tells me is that those regulations are not right, and that those regulations and whatever those policies are, those need to be challenged as part of the remit of the group that is going to be looking at absence within East Ayrshire, because it's not fair that we are not delivering the services that we should be delivering to the people of East Ayrshire, because we are carrying a burden of, 5, 6, 7 or 8 million pounds a year, every year in absence. So if we look at that 40 million pounds that we've given ourselves going forward, how much of that 40 million pounds is going to be spent just covering absence? Now, I know some of these questions are rhetorical, and I'm not expecting that you will answer all of that, but what I'm highlighting here is that this model desperately needs to be changed. And one of the first things I would challenge is the small take-up of physio. And I've moved on to a different page. So I don't know what absence costs us for musculoskeletal problems, but to me, that's a pretty low take-up of physio. So surely, if you're absent because you've got a muscular problem, if you're not taking up the physio option, you should not be paid for that period of absence. And I would make it as simple as that. But, sorry, I'm getting on a bit of a high horse here. But I feel very, very strongly about this, and it impacts so much on everything that we are trying to do as a council. And I also think we should be telling members of the public what it's costing us, because it's not fair on those of us who really do work hard. It simply isn't fair. So, sorry, that's me getting off my high horse.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. I'll bring in Richard Greaveson to do a reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Cogley, and happy to respond and maybe pass on to Donna thereafter for any additional comments. It'll come as no surprise to members, and I want to give members some assurance that this is a significant focus for the executive management team, corporate management team, in terms of our levels of absenteeism. The levels of absenteeism in our council are too high. There's no moving away from that. There's no hiding from that, and therefore that is a focus for us at the moment. The issues is subject to ongoing discussion at EMT, CMT, and certainly led by the Head of People and Culture. Discussions are also ongoing with our joint trade union colleagues through collective bargaining and other service-specific trade union meetings, and with our staff as well. And that's to ensure that everybody understands the size and scale of the challenge. Not just a fiscal financial challenge, but also the additional pressure that's placed on our staff who remain at their work when individuals are off their work and absent. So there's 3 key areas of focus, members, that we're looking at in this regard. The first one has already been touched on in terms of that temporary support and wellbeing team. We know where we have deployed additional HR expertise specifically and embedded that within services. There's been a benefit in terms of that support in regard to attendance management and wellbeing. So I'm pleased that members supported that as a direction of travel yesterday. The second area is something that Councillor Cogley touched on, and that's in regard to our policies and our procedures. Again, we know from some of the service reviews that we've had recently, and the most probably relevant one in this regard is the waste review, where again we've got pockets of absenteeism that are significantly higher than we would wish them to be. And part of that is around, or one of the conclusions that we've drawn, and I had a long detailed discussion with Amanda last week in this regard, is around a review of some of our policies. First and foremost, to ensure that we're able to provide the correct level of support to staff, to support them in terms of their recovery, so that we can get them back to the work. But secondly, support to our managers to ensure that they have the appropriate interventions available to them to help manage absenteeism. And the third element, Chair, is really a proactive one, and that's about getting ahead of the game. How do we support our staff so they don't go off sick in the first place, put bluntly? A healthy, happy workforce is a productive workforce. And again, from the service review programmes that we've led on, we've endeavoured to drive service changes by engaging with staff and allowing them to influence and shape the direction of travel. And again, if I use the waste review as an example, some of the proposals that have been presented have been driven by the staff involved in those services, so that we can make sure that they are healthy, they are happy, they are wanting to come to their work, and it's about getting ahead of the game, as I say, and being proactive in that regard. So they're the sort of three key themes that have been the subject of ongoing discussion at corporate management team and with senior managers, and hopefully through you, Chair, that's given members some assurances that this is an area of focus for us, and as Councillor Cogley has said, if we're able to even eat into some of those absenteeism levels from a financial perspective, there'll be a significant benefit for us moving forward. I don't know whether Donna's got anything to add, Chair, but again, happy to take questions through you.
Thank you, Richard. Over to you, Donna.
Thanks. Yeah, just a small thing to add. Just absolutely, we will be reviewing the policy as part of the group and looking at particular areas, particularly the 1 to 7 day absence is an area that needs quite a lot of attention. It has really grown over the last few years. So that will be quite a big area of focus, and as part of that, then the early intervention processes that we use. So physiotherapy is one of those early intervention methods that we use for people who are complaining about musculoskeletal issues, and you know, even having those physiotherapy appointments while people are still at work, so that it can continue to sustain them. So we will be looking at all of those areas, so it's just really to add that.
Thank you, Donna. Sorry. Councillor Richardson, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Peter. That's been a really good 15 minutes. I liked Councillor Cogley's points. Really liked the reply for Richard, and also liked the input for Donna. Richard said one thing that was really struck home with me. The people that we've really got to protect here are the East Ayrshire Council employees who turn up for work every single day in the working year. They're out at their work at 9 o'clock. They maybe do unpaid work after 5 o'clock. Every sort of organisation has those people that go above and beyond just what's required. They go above the ordinary. But my fear is, because I've seen it happen, it doesn't matter what department you're in or what you do for a living. We all work in teams nowadays, and any team will be affected by people going off in the sick, because the people that are passionate about their job are still turning up, and they're taking on, if they're in social work, they're taking on more cases. If they're in waste management, they're maybe doing more bins. But you can only go in above and beyond and do that extra work for a certain period of time before it starts to impact you yourself. And then, as a business, we're in this downward spiral where good employees are starting to go off because they're having to do the work for people who, as Donna said, there are people who, whatever your internal regulations are and systems, there are people that read that HR manual and know that if they go for a certain amount of days and then come back, and then go for a certain amount of days and then come back, and then go for a certain amount of days and then come back, they don't actually get to the level where that intervention kicks in. So it's things like this that we really need to root out as a council, because we're in this dire financial situation where we can't let the good employees we've got carry passengers. Now, Councillor Cogley started off her intervention by saying that she understood that you need to look after people that are properly ill, seriously ill, and people who are suffering from stress. You need to give them support. We do need to do all of that, but at the end of the day, we might have to look at our internal procedures and just become a wee bit harder, because, as Councillor Cogley said, we can't let these figures. I mean, if you were to graph this absenteeism, it's a straight line that's going upwards. So the new team really needs to get a hold of this issue, and we really need to start taking actions so that the graph levels off and comes back the other way.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. I'm going back to Councillor Cogley and then Councillor Clark, please.
Councillor Richardson, you just said what I didn't dare say. Thank you.
Right, devil's advocate here. I was on an appeals panel, and I don't know if you've ever seen a dead body when the blood settles. I've never seen that on a living face, with big black rings under his. All of us were shocked that he'd actually lost his job due to a period of ill health. Well, this guy was really ill, and I don't think it should have got that far. If we're going to use occupational health and physiotherapy, and it should be part and parcel of your employment, but if somebody's really ill, how did he lose his job? And I think we let him, well, he got his job back with the proviso that he went to occupational health, had blood tests, something was going on with that kid, absolutely. And so we've got to do the right thing, right across the board, and we've got to be seen to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I know from my own experience, 35 years in the private sector in a factory, and absence is much lower. And it's lower for a very good reason, because if absence gets high and the cost attached is getting too high, the management of the factory pull in the workplace reps and the trade unions and start to suggest that we are going to change the sick pay scheme because this is costing the company too much. Now, unfortunately, in the public sector, that's not as simple, because that's all agreed above us at the level of COSLA. Unfortunately, we can't go changing the sick pay scheme and tweaking it to try and get absence down. We have to go the other route and try and support people to get back into work. I'm interested in the cash cost to the council on the absence. Recently, the Chief Executive spoke about 8 million a year. Does that 8 million a year attach directly to paragraph 26 on page 70, when we're 3.85 days lost per employee? Is that £8 million a year, or is it no a direct attachment? Is there provisos on that? And in future, can we monetize this figure instead of just talking about days lost per employee for a period? Can we put a cash value on it? Who would like to? Richard, thank you.
I'll kick off, and colleagues can maybe jump in through you, Chair. I don't have the figure referred to specifically in front of me, but I do know that the figure that we produce specifically is in regard to absenteeism, and doesn't cover the cost of actually having to backfill that post and do the job as well, which is obviously adds further to the bottom line. So, you know, through you, I'm happy to work with Head of People and Culture, Donna, and the team, and you know, and look at these figures in terms of how we present to members in the future to include all of those elements.
Okay, thank you, Richard. It is now 11:30. We've been here for 2 hours. I'm going to suggest that we take a very quick break for 15 minutes, if that's okay. We'll come back in 15 minutes, and the next part will be looking at health and safety with David Donna. Can we pause the recording, please? Okay, we'll call this to order again and resume. Is everyone back? Have anyone missing?
Councillor Cogley, I believe, had left, Chair.
Okay, so that's noted on the
Yeah.
absence thing. And you two's late. You'll get 6 of the belt in the old days, that's what happened. And I can only say that now because we're not recording, so I wasn't threatening violence on anyone. He'd be holding up the queue as usual, probably.
What is the soup, Blair? No.
No? Yeah,
I think that'd be quite nice.
sounds like green nonsense to me. All right, Right, thank you. Right, let's get serious, behave yourselves. Right, we'll go back to, we're on to health and safety now. So we'll bring in David Doran, please.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, members. If I could just start by drawing members' attention to the top of page 106 of the summary report. We noted that there were 798 non-reportable incidents that have come through to health and safety, and that's an increase of 137 incidents when we compare that to the same period last year. Incidents reportable to HSE have just increased by 3 in that time, and if you can look at the key points panel, in the middle of 106, you'll see that the vast majority of them were slips, trips and falls, which accounted for 11 of those 18 incidents in total. Having had a look at those incidents, there's no clear pattern in there. There's a spread right across services in that, so I'm not particularly concerned about that slight increase in RIDA reportable incidents. Normally around this time, Chair, I would say that the increase in incidents is due to dysregulated behaviours in educational establishments, but that's not the case this time. And while there has been a slight increase in violence and aggression incidents, 39, the spread in that is both across educational and non-educational establishments. And there's also an increase right across the board in terms of other things like slips, trips and falls, playground and horseplay, and absconding incidents as well. The number of days to report an incident near the bottom of the page, bottom of page 107, has reduced from 3.3 days to 2.5 days, and that continues to be well within the 5-day target set. And in order to ensure safety compliance across the Council's higher risk activities, there were a total of 1,517 recorded unannounced inspections carried out over the reporting period. The outcome of these inspections and the detailed actions taken to address any safety deficiencies found is reported to the appropriate senior management teams on a monthly basis for their consideration and any further action required. I'd be happy to stop at that point, Chair, and take any questions on the content of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Have we any questions in the room on health and safety? Okay, David, we were talking about absence earlier, and with the waste review, we're doing away with the trolleys, which hopefully will help musculoskeletal. Can you give us your comments, your briefing on musculoskeletal, manual handling training, and trying to get absence numbers down?
Yeah, in terms of manual handling training, taking that, first of all, Chair, we deliver manual handling training right across the council. In fact, we've no long finished training staff in Ayrshire Roads Alliance, and we'll shortly be starting to train staff in housing as well, and housing asset services. So we do a lot of training around manual handling. In terms of actual musculoskeletal injuries, the funny thing here is that the vast majority, well, they're in the top 5 and continue to be in the top 5 reasons for absence. In terms of workplace health and safety, they're actually really, really low. So our manual handling incidents over these reporting periods was just 16. So we only had 16 reports of manual handling. So from a safety perspective, I'm not concerned that either people's competence around manual handling or the working practice, safe working practices we have in place are actually driving the figures behind musculoskeletal injuries. So I'm fairly comfortable about that, Chair. It could be due to other factors such as maybe an ageing workforce or people being injured whilst carrying out their normal day-to-day activities. So just to answer your question or around health and safety, I'm not concerned about that, Chair, and the numbers in terms of manual handling incidents are very low, and I think that's down to the excellent work done by the services, where we do a lot of manual handling activities and through the training that staff get.
Right, thank you, David. If there's no other questions on health and safety, we'll move on. The next part of East Ayrshire Performance Report is, well, there's three parts. There's business briefings, complaints and risks. And they're all back to John McLachlan, please.
Thanks, Chair. So, beginning page 109, number of indicators for you to review. We note the first one in terms of the top benefits processing and number of days within target. We can see in terms of the householder planning applications, and we can see the reasons for that there in terms of the stop the clock and also the legacy claims as well. Housing communities, page 110. Average number of days to relate properties. We can see the challenges across specific areas of the council. Note that what the colleagues are doing to bring this back online. The percentage factor block inspections carried out. Number of bridge inspections. These have been impacted by staffing issues, although I would note that recruitment to these posts is taking place and will conclude shortly. With your approval, Chair, moving on to complaints on page 116. Sets out in detail the number of complaints that have been received, a total of 30. 7 were brought forward for the previous period, and of those, 28 were closed with full response given. 9 complaints open and will carry forward into Q2. And touching back on those 28 complaints, 17 were dealt with at stage 1 and 7 at stage 2. The remainder were escalated. As we do with our complaints and in line with the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman's recommendation, we note the improvement actions that services are taking. Those services include Ayrshire Roads Alliance, my own, education, housing and communities, and that will hopefully over time lead to improved performance, albeit noting that complaints are generally falling for this period. Time taken to respond to complaints at Q1, stage 1, stage 2 and those were escalated is lower than the comparative period for last year. And just to finish off, Chair, the risks are at page 119. Presented in a new format, we've got a 5-grid, 5-box risk matrix to support review, shows the likelihood and the implication. And they are there as noted. Pleased to say that been reviewed by the Council's management team. At this period of time in Q1 report, no new risks have been added, nor have we changed the category of the risks that are there, albeit I would add that as we go forward, it is likely in line with the Chief Exec's risk group that he chairs, that some of the risks will likely change for perhaps the next report, Chair. Happy to stop there. In advance of any questions coming, I would say that the recommendations for Cabinet are on page 65, and the one recommendation for your committee to note the recommendations of Cabinet is contained on page 66.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions first on business briefings? Page 109 to 114. No. The next part is the complaints section, page 116 and 17. If you have any questions or comments. Nothing online. Oh, well, we're not online. Thank you. And the last part is the risks and the risk assessment matrices, page 119 to 131. Any questions? Councillor Richardson.
Listen, this is just a wee bit flippant, but I didn't really get my head around the Rubik's Cube. I just prefer green, amber or red, Joe, to be honest.
So, through you, Chair. So, what this tends to provide is less of a blunter analysis with the simple RAG status, and it gives colleagues and heads of service the opportunity to escalate but still keep it within a manageable level, or indeed escalate, as we've done with the first one, and put it to the maximum in terms of likelihood and the maximum in terms of implication. So the impact rather, and that's what it's trying to do. I think over time we'll maybe get used to it. Perhaps there's a need for members to be taken through it and shown what it's doing, but it will provide an opportunity for you to perhaps understand when risks, albeit in the old format, might still have been amber but had moved within amber. This will let you see the movement.
Thank you, Joe. It is kind of still red, amber, green. It's just in a slightly different format. I'm used to risk assessments on health and safety. The one on page 121, it's economic climate risk is a red. So that as elected members asking questions, I think we clearly have to focus on what appears in the wee red sections. Could you comment on that one, economic climate risk, please?
Absolutely. So this is wider than the council, and it's essentially an assessment of what's happening in the towns and villages across East Ayrshire, and how the pressures within those homes and businesses is impacting on the council. In the report that I gave on the revenue section, we kind of spent a bit of time on one part and not on the other. We're seeing real pressures that exist in terms of the council tax shield, pressures in terms of council tax benefit. We're paying roughly around £1 million more than we get income for. Crisis grants and community care grants on the Scottish Welfare Fund. We are the only council in Scotland that has crisis grants at low eligibility and community care grants at medium eligibility. We're the only one with those two ratings. So that's showing the pressure out there. That is then bleeding through in terms of the available funding that's coming in, both in terms of general grant funding, but also in terms of the impact that households have in terms of payment. Perversely, what we also see is that in terms of council tax, we are seeing an increased element of yield, which is generally a good thing. It's when you are seeing, in first glance, more people paying. When you analyse that yield, what you're finding is it's the 10% that are being added on by sheriff as we pass to sheriff officers. So there's almost the state of the finances within the communities is impacting on the income levels that we have in the council. What I would say is the Digital Management Board is looking at a specific piece of work around income levels, use of debtors accounts, and the like, and whether or not that's the most appropriate way of charging and the risks that lie within it. And that report will be brought to the Digital Management Board. It will come to the council management team, and it will come to members as well. But that's essentially the flavour of what's happening in that one.
Thank you, Joe. Are there no other questions in the room or online? Well, if we go back to page 66, 65 and 66, we have a quick glance through the recommendations. Note the financial management position, note the precautionary expenditure management measures detailed, approve communities and economy recovery plan, note the recovery plan for education, recovery presented to the IJB, note the financial resilience indicators, note the contract figure exceeding the tender value for the foregate, note the information in respect to people, approve the allocation of 0.608 million for general fund uncommitted balance, note the health and safety update, note the current risk as identified, and otherwise note the contents of this report. Are we happy with East Ayrshire Performs report and the recommendations? Everyone's happy. Thank you. That ends that item on the agenda. We move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the complaints annual review, and that's presented by June McIntyre, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is the Council's annual complaints handling report that's been prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman. As we set out in the background section of the covering report, all councils and local authorities across Scotland are required to follow the SPSO's model complaints handling procedure, and that forms the basis of the complaints handling procedure that we apply within the council. Turning to complaints performance, we're required to report annually to the SPSO on the number of complaints that we deal with under the procedure, on the times taken to respond to complaints, and that's basically the information that's set out in the report that's attached to Appendix 1. As you'll see at paragraph 11, we received a total of 136 formal complaints last year that were responded to within the complaints handling process. It's broadly in line with previous years, a slight decrease on 22-23, but certainly less than we sometimes see. In terms of reporting to the SPSO, we also report the number of complaints that have been handled by the SPSO. So the final stage in the Council's complaints process is an escalation or appeals procedure. And we've included at paragraph 13 the number of complaints that were escalated to the SPSO. You'll see that included 4 premature complaints, a total of 23 overall. And we're pleased to see that of the complaints that were escalated to the SPSO, none were overturned or there were no amendments to the findings of the Council in that. So that's positive for us and provides some assurance in terms of our handling of complaints. We also received some positive feedback from the SPSO about our Stage 2 complaints response letters that we've included at paragraph 14. At paragraph 17 on, we've touched on the continuous improvement agenda that Joe had mentioned earlier. Obviously, the purpose of complaints handling for us is to ensure that we learn from complaints and we use it to improve services. As a corporate support service, we also work closely with services to support them to improve their complaints handling and make sure that we're adhering to the CHP. And over the last few months, that's focused on the introduction of new child-friendly complaints handling guidance and principles that we've referred to at paragraph 23 onwards. That's not relevant to this annual performance report, but when we come back next year, you'll see us begin to report on the number of complaints that we're handling that involve or relate to children or young people under the age of 18. And that's part of the wider implementation of the UNCRC in Scots law. So we're working closely with services to prepare for that. And it came into effect from July. As I say, that'll be reported next year. But for now, Appendix 1, the 23-24 annual report is presented for members' consideration. And I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, June. Any questions from the elected members? Councillor Richardson, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a quick question for June. Page 134, paragraph 17, June. And I get this completely because a lot of private sector companies look upon complaints as being the best source of information so that they can actually use complaints and trends within the complaints received to improve service. So I get where paragraph 17 is coming from. June, can you just give us one example of where we saw a trend in complaints and actually changed council policies or procedures in line with that to stop those type of complaints coming in and basically improve the service we're providing to the public?
You put me on the spot here. I know there were some specific changes over the last year in terms of the handling and communicating with service users of the BSL needs. That's one that sort of comes to mind. But I'd be happy to provide some more detail of that to you, Councillor, and come back to you directly on that.
That'd be brilliant. I mean, it doesn't have to be War and Peace, June, just bullet points as to the trends we saw in complaints, so similar complaints coming in, and then how we improved our service in line with the feedback we were getting. That would be brilliant.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I'm happy to provide that. We do provide quarterly updates to CMT that include details of all the improvement actions that arise from complaints, so we can pull that together for you.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson, for the question and June for the reply. Any other questions on the complaints annual report? Online? No. Sorry. The child-friendly complaints handling, paragraph 24. We're not doing it yet. We're just started it.
Yeah, the SPSO provided the final procedure to us in July, and it came into effect in the middle of July, so we are now implementing it. It's been something of a soft launch by the SPSO. They gave us an original version last year in draft form that was much more complicated than what we're currently working to now, so they've refined that and engaged with partners over the last year. So we now have a new model. We've been working with colleagues in education and health and social care in particular to introduce that. We think that's where the most of the demand will be, and I know that colleagues in education are already dealing with at least one complaint under the new process. So it is live, but I think it'll be subject potentially to further refinement over the next year, and we haven't had the final training materials through from the SPSO. So to a certain extent, there's a little bit of peer learning and experience going on over this year, so it's a bit of a soft launch. And our first full year of applying the new principles will be the next reporting year.
It is quite interesting. I don't know if I'm speaking just for myself. I'd be concerned that this is going to focus mostly on schools. Complaints raised directly by a child or complaints raised by an adult, either on behalf of the child or about matters that affect that child. I'm worried this could snowball and it's all going to be about bullying in schools and mums and dads reporting bullying on behalf of their child, and how we could deal with that. That could snowball big time, I'm thinking.
Yeah, and that was a concern that we had originally. We've been reassured by the SPSO and the guidance around this. I think there is a proportionate approach here. Schools will still deal with concerns on a day-to-day basis as part of their routine business, and there will be engagement with parents and children before it gets to the formal complaints process, and we would hope that that's an opportunity to resolve these situations as they arise. I suppose this is just making sure that the child's voice is heard if things are taken further and become more serious. But we're reassured by the SPSO that there's a proportionality there about what becomes a formal complaint and what is business as usual within the school. And there's also a sort of professional judgment element in terms of balancing the best interests of the child and the interests of the parents that the colleagues in education deal with on a day-to-day basis. So hopefully the worst case scenario won't arise and it will be manageable for us. As I say, it's something the SPSO are keeping an eye on over the next few months as we see how this turns out in practice.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your response and for presenting the report. I would just comment as well, the case studies are really useful for us to give us an example of how you deal with the complaints and investigate. So the 4 case studies you put on the paper are very useful. So we'll keep doing that. That's quite a handy thing to see. Thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you.
We'll move now to the next item on the agenda, which is the annual procurement report, 1st of April 23 to 31st of March 24, and that's Leslie McLean, please.
Good morning, Chair and Members. I'm here to present the Council's annual procurement report for the period the 1st of April 2023 to the 31st of March 2024. The report has been produced using the Scottish Government standardised templates, and minimum reporting requirements are listed at paragraph 3 on pages 152 and 153. I'm going to just take you through some of the key elements of the report. On page 160, Table 1 provides a high-level summary of the regulated procurement projects awarded by the procurement team. What we mean by regulated procurement projects is goods and services over £50,000 and works contracts over £2 million. So during the reporting period, there were 86 projects with a total estimated value of £268 million awarded. We did, however, undertake 146 projects during the period, mainly sub-threshold projects, but detailed of all the regulated projects awarded can be found in Appendix 1. Our low-value procurement activities are the low-value, low-risk. These are the projects that we conduct in between the value of £500 to £50,000 and the £2 million for works, which aren't covered under any existing contractual arrangement, and these are detailed on page 161. And over the reporting period, there have been 400 quotes and mini competitions carried out on top of our 146 projects at the regulated value. We also have a legal requirement to undertake a review of whether our procurement activities are carried out in accordance with our procurement strategy. We do require to observe a number of general duties to fulfil specific obligations, and these are listed on pages 162 to 165. I can advise all of our procurement activities are undertaken in accordance with Council's standing orders relating to contracts, the scheme of financial delegation and statutory legislation. Therefore, the governance framework in which we operate ensures that all of our procurement activities are compliant and are delivered in accordance with our strategy. The Council also have an obligation to manage our spend effectively and to consider wider social, environment and economic benefits of our tendering and contracting activities. The provision of community benefits is included in all regulated procurement projects, and all such benefits are managed, monitored and reported by the appointed contract administrators for the respective client service. At the time of compiling the report, the community benefits reported back to the Centre have been included on pages 166 and 167. Members will note the success of the previous DFIB initiative, which we introduced in partnership with Health and Safety colleagues late 2022, for which we won the Procurement Social Value Award last year, and to advise members that we will be formally launching the next initiative. It's the Cost of Living Initiative, which was discussed last year, is formally getting launched on the 7th of October this year. The distribution and logistics process has taken a bit of time to be finalised. We have received quite substantial donations of equipment in, and that is now ready to be issued via the community larders. And we are hoping that this new initiative is going to be just as successful as a DFIB. We would also welcome the opportunity to have a meeting with members to discuss further opportunities and further initiatives which may benefit our communities. We've got a couple of examples in mind that we'd like to propose, but obviously happy to discuss further if we could get a meeting set up. If I move to page 168 of the report, I have also provided a summary of the spend recorded against supported businesses. During the reporting period, our spend analysis shows that we have spent approximately £550,000 with registered supported businesses, which is an increase of approximately £161,000 on the previous year. If I now take you to page 171 of the report, this reflects our influenceable procurement spend. As part of our community wealth building agenda, we continue to work closely with colleagues in economic development and the supplier development programme to identify tendering and training opportunities to encourage local suppliers to bid for work. And I felt it may be beneficial to provide members with visibility of our spend at a local level as we continue on our journey to support our local business community to tender for our projects. Our local spend during the reporting period was circa £65 million, which was an increase of 11.27% on the previous reporting period. There are also a couple of appendices at the back of the report which provide the details of our future tendering and contract work plan, and these are for noting. And that concludes my report, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Leslie. We'll open up to the room if there's any questions on the procurement report. No one online. I can comment on page 171. There's table 4. I'm delighted to see the amount that our procurement spend has been spent in Ayrshire and indeed in East Ayrshire, and that's increasing. So long may that continue. I hope it increases even further if possible. Can I ask about the community benefits, the benefits in kind?
Yep.
Can you tell us a wee bit about that? Because there's organisations and groups there who are doing benefits in kind back to us that I don't recognise.
So this will be the other community benefits delivered, which have been reported. So obviously the top one is the previous Optima Health contract. They've delivered some menopausal webinar sessions with their senior occupational health advisor. The Ailing contract is a pan-Ayrshire contract with the Health and Social Care Partnership for self-directed support. And again, they've done... What's Ailing? What's that, ALIN? Ailing are the contracted supplier. So ALIN are the service provider that deliver the advice service for the self-directed support service, and they have run some various workshops for dementia services. They've set up the stall to discuss the wellbeing cafe in Irvine, Saltcoats and the Galston early day centre. So they've done quite a few sessions for that. Another one of our providers for Health and Social Care Partnership are Partners for Inclusion. They've provided a work placement as part of their contract, and the same with We Are With You, who are another health and social care provider for the council. And you'll see that the Kilmarnock Railway Heritage Trust, they have provided 30 number work placements. They are student therapists from a number of educational establishments going through their training, and it's to give them that knowledge and skills to take them on to their next development stage. Cornerstone Community Care, Health and Social Care Partnerships provider again have provided 15 weeks of work placements, again for students, for learning disability nurse placements, and these students have came from Glasgow Caledonian University, and they've done 2 weeks work placements with Cornerstone Community Care.
What is Cornerstone Community Care? Where are they?
They're a service provider as well.
Right, okay. And Office Angels, what's Office Angels? They've been planting trees.
Office Angels are dealing with some energy efficiency measures for housing asset services. So they've taken the opportunity to do some biodiversity and environmental works for us. So,
thank you very much for that explanation. Any other questions from the room on procurement? Councillor Canning.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. Just a quick question on page 165. I was pleased to see we're supporting smaller businesses with requiring our contractors to pay their subcontractors on time. How do we monitor that? Maybe a bit detailed, but how do we monitor that?
at the moment, we don't actually monitor it. It is a contractual condition within the council's terms and conditions of contract that subcontractors have to be paid within 28 days, the same as what we pay our suppliers and service providers on other contracts. So at the moment, we don't actually monitor it, but it is a contractual condition, which means if we find out that they haven't been paying that, then we can take measures in terms of their contractual obligations to potentially hold them in breach of contract or to put in place measures to make sure that they are paying it. But things like that would be picked up as part of the contract management and monitoring activities through the contract administrator, so that should be part of regular discussions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon, for the question, and Leslie for the reply. Is anyone else? Councillor Richardson.
It's just really a comment, Chair. It's just to say, well done to every officer and all of the companies that were involved in the DFIB community initiative. I know that in my ward we've now issued DFIB equipment, life-saving equipment to the North West Bowling Club, North West Boxing Club, just recently the residents of the John Walker Drive Residents Association. One of the residents actually police constable, I'll not mention his name, but police constable to by Creer was community minded to allow a DFIB to be placed on the outside of his own house, so that the rest of the community can. You hope these things are never needed, but if needed, it will be in a place where the public at the John Walker Drive area can access it. So that basically just to say that initiative's been. And to my mind, it's been a fantastic success, and it's just to wish everybody involved in the cost of living initiative that's coming down the line. You know, if it's as successful as the DFIB scheme, then that'll be a result.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. You want back in, Leslie? No, you agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. This is a regular report that comes before the Governance and Scrutiny Committee, and as the Chair says, it's for the period 7 June to the 22nd of August. Details of the tendering process in respect of each of the contract is shown at Appendix 1. The report is for noting. If there's any detailed, I would probably defer to my expert colleague in the room, Leslie McLean. Thank you, Chair.
Any comments or questions, please, on the awarding of contracts? Councillor Canning.
Thanks. Thanks, Julie. No, just that direct award call-off process. I just wonder if you could explain exactly what that is. You know, where there's only one bid.
Through yourself, Chair. A direct award call-off process is an award through a pre-existing framework which has been awarded on behalf of maybe another local authority or other public body. It saves us going out to formal tender, and we use direct awards on quite a regular basis through various means, through like the Crown Commercial Services, the Treasury Service Office, Scotland Excel, Scottish Government contracts. They have tendered on behalf of the whole public sector, and we reserve the right to direct award or call off from any contract or framework which they put in place.
Okay, thanks. I suppose I would just, seems a bit odd that one of the other telecom providers would bid for a contract with us, but maybe we're just on the smaller side in terms of authorities. And
okay.
Thank you, Councillor Canning, and thank you, Leslie, for the reply. No other questions? No. Nothing online. So we'll go back to the recommendation, page 210. Committee asked to note the contracts awarded during the period in question. Are we happy with that as a recommendation? Thank you, everyone. And that's the last minute on the agenda. That's the last item. So thank you all for your attendance, and we'll see you next time, which will be a 10 o'clock start, not 9:30. Thank you.
Well done, Chair. Your first meeting.